Hello and welcome to Just Films and That, the podcast that celebrates films we think are underrated, underappreciated, underseen, or we just really, really wanted to talk about them. I'm your host, Alice Oliver, and with me, as always, is Josh Hallam. Hi there, Josh.
Hello.
Indeed. There he is. And this week, it was Josh's turn to pick the film, and he went with Green Lantern from 2011. So let's get stuck in. Well then, Josh, you were pretty excited about this one, and here it is. The time has come. Josh picked Green Lantern, listeners, from 2011, so spoiler warning if you haven't seen it. Josh, why on earth did you pick this film? But first, what's it about? A Green Lantern, perhaps?
Yeah, that's it. So, without getting too heavy into the lore and the comic book stuff of Green Lantern, Ryan Reynolds is Hal Jordan. He's a pretty obnoxious fighter pilot. One day he finds a dead or dying purple alien who gives him a green ring. The green ring gives him superpowers because it makes him one of the Green Lanterns, who are a sort of almost like a police service of the universe, powered by the power of will. And he becomes a Green Lantern, and it goes from there pretty much, without going too much into it. So that's what it's about. Why did I pick it? Well, I'm excited to talk about this one. So I've had this on my list for a little while, and we've always avoided throughout the whole life of the podcast talking particularly about massive franchises, particularly comic book movies.
Sure.
But this isn't really part of a franchise because it didn't go anywhere. And the reason it didn't go anywhere is it got an absolute kick in when it came out. It got absolutely slated.
Oh, dear.
Some people say things like it's one of the worst films ever made. Ryan Reynolds himself has poked fun at the film.
Oh, poor Ryan.
So I think that the film is flawed. I do think it's flawed. I'm not going into it saying it's a masterpiece, but I wanted to start in 2022 with a bang. I think, bold statement going into the year, that this is not as bad as some people say that it is.
Okay.
So had you seen it before? I don't think you had, though, had you?
I hadn't seen it, but I was semi-aware of this reputation of it being not very well received. A lot of the noise I heard about it was Ryan Reynolds' CGI'd outfit, costume, his superhero getup, shall we say.
I got a lot to say about that.
And that was the main thing. That was the main thing I heard, like, oh yeah, people thought it was terrible, like it didn't look like it was attached to him and all this. But then apart from that, I hadn't really heard anything else. So I went into it with, I guess, some expectation, but not loads, and not having that much knowledge of the film. I have only quite recently. I mean, when I was a kid, I loved Superman and I loved the Superman films, and I did enjoy Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Apart from that, I hadn't really been into superhero films until lockdown, and I went back and I watched all the Marvel films. I think it started when I kind of got into Captain America because of Chris Evans, really.
Chrissy Evans,
I watched, like, I can't remember if I watched Civil War or one of them, and I was
you love Chrissy Evans, don't you?
I do. I think he's great. I think he's a fabulous actor. So I've kind of backtracked basically, and I've been watching loads of superhero films, and now I'm totally invested. I'm in it, and like any new sort of superhero, Marvel, DC thing that comes out, I will watch it. I am on that bandwagon firmly now. So I was excited to watch this. So you think it's underrated. Tell me and the listeners some of the reasons why you like this film.
Okay, so, right. And I've already said this, I'll say it again. There are flaws to this film. There are. But
no one's arguing with you over that, Josh.
but I think it has a lot of redeeming features. First of all, I think it looks pretty spectacular in a lot of ways. I have issues with the costume. I do, right? But my issue with the costume isn't actually all of the costume. It's the mask. I think the mask looks shit.
100%.
But I think the costume looks great. People sort of going, it doesn't look real. It is not real, though, is it?
Mm-hmm.
He has a ring that can do anything powered by will. What are you looking for? A fucking Ken Loach film?
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I've got a lot to say, Alice.
Go on, I'm excited.
Right.
Go, lay
So
it
I
on
think
me.
it looks really good. I think I think there's some good CGI in there as well as bad CGI. I really like the world building. I think you can go into this, and I'm interested to know your take on this. I think you can go into this not knowing a lot about the comics and not be too overwhelmed. I don't think it's too hard a concept to get your head round. There's loads of really great looking aliens. So in the universe, it's split up into quadrants. Every quadrant has a Green Lantern. Each Green Lantern is sort of responsible for millions or thousands of planets or galaxies. And they're all different. There's loads of different ones. And I think they pay really great attention, because I do like the comics as well. They pay really great attention to putting some of the characters from the comics in it, even if it's just in the background. So, for example, there is an alien in it that is in the comics, which is, I think he's from a planet that is entirely in darkness and none of the creatures on the planet can see. So obviously it's not much use being the Green Lantern, is it? So his ring makes a sound that is pleasurable to his race's ears.
Mm-hmm.
And there's things like that. He is just in the background. And there's loads of really great looking aliens in there. You've got Tomar Ray, who's voiced by Jeffrey Rush, Kilowog, who's voiced by the late great Michael Clark Duncan. I think Sinestro, who is
come on, Mark.
He looks great.
Strong.
Oh,
what
Mark
a
Strong.
delight!
And he
what
loved
a
doing
delight.
this as well. I had a friend who did a film with him, as in a background role, and he spoke to him, and he said to him, I really loved Green Lantern, even though it got a bad reputation. And he said, so did I. I really loved doing it, and I really wish it... Because in the comics, again, and it alludes to this in the post-credits scene, spoilers if you've not seen it, just cut to 10 seconds later, but Sinestro is sort of Green Lantern's Lex Luthor or Joker. He's his big bad guy. And in this world, all the different colours are different emotions. So green is willpower, and yellow is the power of fear. And he takes the power of fear. They've made it into a ring, and he wears that, and that turns him into a Yellow Lantern, or a part of the Sinestro Corps. And I just think he looks great in it. He really owns the part. Every scene he's in, you just can't help but watch him. And that says something, because considering he sort of just looks like it's Mark Strong with a big head and a really bad sunburn all the way through it. And a little twiddly mustache. He's got a little twiddly mustache.
You love
well.
them on your villains.
I love a little twiddly mustache. I can't help it. What can I say? It's a Dick Dastardly mustache, isn't it? That's what
Absolutely.
he's got. I think it's good. I think it looks amazing. I think they build a really good world.
I would agree with you on some of the way that it looks.
Yeah.
So a lot of the space stuff. So there's
Epic.
planets, there's galaxies, there's stars. I really enjoyed all that.
The word for me is epic. That's what it brought to mind.
Wow,
yeah.
you heard it here, ladies and
And
gentlemen.
I don't necessarily mean in the sense of like Gladiator is epic. I mean like it looks. I think you can feel it makes everything feel big. It does a really good job of making stuff feel big. Sorry, as you were saying, the world.
Yeah, no, but I completely agree. I love space stuff. Like, if something's got space things in it, I'm instantly hooked. Like, whether it's spaceships, the stars, the galaxies, just the brilliant colors and the creativity that can come with it. You've seen Guardians of the Galaxy,
Love
and in
them.
particular,
Love them.
the second one, the second Guardians of the Galaxy is just incredible. The way they create these worlds, these like intergalactic worlds, and there was a little bit of that in this. There was hints of that. Like they're on this planet Oa. I believe.
That's
and
like
the way
headquarters, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And the way they designed that, I thought was beautiful. So when we were in space, I really did like the visuals, and I thought they were pretty good. What else did you like about this, Josh?
So I also think that it's pretty well cast. I've already touched on Mark Strong.
What a supporting cast.
Oh, it's great.
My goodness.
You got
Sorry, go on.
Ryan Reynolds. So he's in there. Now, I believe, from what I've read, he didn't have a great time making this film. I believe he clashed with the director, right? I'm not gonna go into that. I don't know. It was 10 years ago, and I don't know how or what went down. But I think Ryan Reynolds is really good in this. I believe one of the problems was that the director only wanted Bradley Cooper, right? Now, Bradley Cooper would have smashed it as well. I think Bradley Cooper would have smashed it. But I really like Ryan Reynolds. I think he's quite likable.
Really like Ryan.
I mean, he does that Ryan Reynolds shtick very well, as we've mentioned when we've done other films, particularly Just Friends when Jermaine came on.
Yeah, of course.
But I think he is likable as hell. He's charismatic, but he's also obnoxious and arrogant and a bit thoughtless, a bit of a dick at times as well. So I think he is a good lead. touched on Mark Strong. I think he's good. I do think Blake Lively's quite good in it as well. I think she's got some good moments. She's a little bit underwritten. I can see you shaking your head, but we'll come on to that. I think, we got Tim Robbins in there, Angela Bassett.
He turns up in some of the most random things, doesn't he?
He does.
Tim Robbins.
He sort of just does what he wants, because he'll do this. He'll turn up in he's in Austin Powers at one point, but then he'll do
War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
High Fidelity he's in, and then obviously Shawshank and all the other things that we know that he's in. I really like Peter Sarsgaard in this. I remember watching it, finding his performance annoying, and when I've looked back at it now, it is a bit hammy, it is a bit cartoony, but it's quite a cartoony part, and he just looks like he's having the time of his life.
He's a superhero villain.
With a big head.
He's a villain in the superhero story. They're very cartoony.
Yeah.
They're very over the top.
So
we need clear indications of who the bad guy is. And you get that in this.
Twiddly mustaches. I think both of the people, a lot of people in this have twiddly mustaches. Does Parallax have a twiddly mustache? I can't remember.
Maybe.
There's a lot of twiddly mustaches in this. It should have been called the Twiddly Mustache Lantern. So I think it's well cast. I do think we'll come on to Blake Lively's character. She might be a bit underwritten, but I do think there's a good chemistry between those two, which probably checks out considering that they are now married.
Now married, happily married with a little family.
With a couple of kids. So ultimately, that's all the stuff I like about it. I think it's got an epicness to it, particularly the space scenes, which I've already talked about. And my main point, which I hope you agree with, but I'll see, and I'm crossing my fingers to see what you think. But I think, considering how much this cost, I think it did enough to earn a sequel. It is not perfect, it is flawed, but I think it sets up the world enough that if it had been successful, more could have been done with that world, because it's almost got limitless potential considering the whole concept of it. But I'm on tenterhooks here. What did you think?
I thought it was all right. I did think it was okay. I didn't hate it. I didn't feel the hatred that I think a lot of people do feel for it. A lot of the things that you've already said, some of the visuals were brilliant, some of them were not, and we'll get on to those things.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we will.
I really love the underground. What are they in? There's this underground lab. So Angela Bassett's character, and is it Sarsgaard, his character?
So I always get it confused because of the Sarsgaard family, like Stellan and Bill and Alexander. I think it's Sarsgaard.
Oh, excuse me, Sarsgaard.
But I can't be too sure. But yeah, Hector Hammond.
So Hector. So we've got Hector. He spends a lot of time in this underground kind of lab, engineering room sort of thing. And there's these great big mechanisms, and there's this huge circle that's going round and round, and it's all kind of bright orange and purple. And it looks like it might be a portal to another world, but I don't think you really find out what it is. But those kind of visuals were really, really good. I really like the theme of will being your superpower, of will generating your superpower. It's quite a positive message. That's a good thing for kids to be learning. The way to conquer your fear, the way to conquer darkness is to be brave and have will, and to make yourself kind of overcome these hurdles that you face, and to have courage and stuff. I thought those were all really good messages. Everything had a bit of a green tint to it, which, I'm here for that. Let's have a bit of a theme. We've got it. Do some Matrix for me,
Well, you're from Wales. Green,
exactly.
I mean?
The land of my fathers. Green grass of home. There we are. I liked Hector's great big prosthetic head. That was another part of the visuals.
Big head, twiddly mustache.
Yeah, the prosthetics, the makeup, like you said, with the aliens. I thought that was all very good. You could see that a lot of work had gone into that. Taika Waititi, I love seeing him. I thought he did really well. I also liked the way they depicted Parallax, and especially when he came down onto Earth and he's like this big scary smoke monster. And those CGI bits didn't look too bad. It certainly felt like it was trying to do something that maybe it wasn't quite ready for. I wonder if this had come out 10 years later, because the potential is there, the story is there. I was a little bit confused at first, and we've got this beginning where it's a bit of voiceover, a bit of narration, I think, and they're trying to kind of explain who's who and what's what and what's been going on in the galaxy. Some of that I found a little bit hard to follow, but you do kind of catch up as you go on. But like you say, and about a sequel, you could be ready for a sequel for that. So I love Mark Strong, right? When
Yeah.
we watched Stardust, he, for me, was the standout in that as Septimus. I
He's
just
fantastic.
thought he was brilliant.
He's brilliant, yeah.
So I want to see that film. I want to see him being the villain.
And
I want to see him.
That's why Sinestro going up against this Green Lantern. I think I don't think we're the only ones who'd watch that.
I would watch that. I would watch that. Now it can still be made. We've still got Mark Strong. We've still got Ryan Reynolds. I know he's taking a little break from acting for now, but I would watch that. And like you say, the possibilities are endless because we're spanning across the galaxy at this point. It's like what Marvel did with Captain Marvel. She can travel anywhere she wants. And so that opens the doors for anything. You can literally make anything happen. And we've seen it happen with Guardians of the Galaxy. I know I keep going on about it. It's just I only saw the second one recently and I was really blown away and I thought it was great and I cried a little bit.
That's amazing.
So now I'm just like, oh, I love it. I'm so here for Guardians. And I feel like this had some of the similar energy to that and it could have been as good. But there were a few things that let it down. So we will move on now to things that perhaps we didn't like about the film or that we would change. So Josh, where do we start with this for you?
So, I've already said it. There are flaws. There are issues with this film. A couple of things for me. First of all, pacing. I know we've talked about it again in other episodes. It starts really well. I think it starts really well with a good exposition dump. I know some people don't like it, but I think that the beginning is good. And I think it's important for those people who perhaps aren't familiar with the comics and the story and the concept. Then it drops off a little bit. Then it picks back up again when he goes to the planet and gets his powers. Then it sort of drops off again, and then it builds to a climax. It's a bit up and down. It's a bit all over the place. It is boring in parts. As I've said, I think Blake Lively's character is underwritten, and I can see you were sort of shaking your head when I was saying that.
So I thought when she first come on screen and, was just getting into the film, I thought she was a bad actor. And then about halfway through, I kind of realized, no, she isn't a bad actor. She's just not been given enough to do. And there isn't enough about her character. That's kind of how I thought. I don't think I've seen her in anything else. So I didn't really have anything else to go off. I think she'd been in like Gossip Girl or something, but that's not something I'd seen.
And made a name from.
Yeah, and then for me, she's just always been Ryan Reynolds' wife. So then I saw her and I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting to see her. And at first, I was a bit like, nah, she's not good. And then I was like, nah, hang on a minute. The writing around her just isn't strong enough. Because I thought she had a few good moments.
Yeah, and she's just not fleshed out enough as a character. Mm-hmm. She's just a bit one note and a bit damsel in distress. They make a few attempts with little bits of dialogue which do work, but there's not enough of it, I think, to carry it through. So I agree with you there. She is underwritten. I would say another issue for me is I think it needed a more compelling villain. I think Parallax is a good villain, but this was in the era before we had really good villains, before we had Thanos and other good villains like Loki and things like that. So it's a big cloud. Mm-hmm. And it sort of ominously moves its way towards Earth. And that's really it. I don't think we get enough from Parallax. I think Hector is a good villain. And I think there would have, with a few tweaks, you could have perhaps intertwined the two so that we got a bit more from Hector and a bit less from Parallax. So perhaps Parallax is there as a threat, but he doesn't necessarily, he's not necessarily, the way that, for example, in some of the Marvel films before Thanos is in it, he's there, and he's there, and he's looming over everything.
Yeah.
But he's not there. And I think it needed a bit more of that. I think we perhaps, you make Hector the main villain, and then Parallax is looming over everything, and have that more as a plot device. So I do think that's an issue. Some of the script is a little clunky, which comes back to the Blake Lively character, but also little bits of dialogue where, I don't really think we need that much of Ryan Reynolds wants to be like his dad. I don't think we need that. There's a few plot holes as well. So, for example, there's a bit where Hector is in the lab and he's trying to kill his dad and he's trying to kill Amanda Waller, who's a scientist who's working with him. And Ryan Reynolds, Green Lantern just shows up out of nowhere. And there's no indication about how he would know that was going on. There's nothing to say he's like Superman and has super hearing. I think in the comics there is stuff that tells him where the danger is linked to the ring. But if you don't know the comics, you wouldn't know that. So he just seems to just turn up. So there are a few flaws with the script. It is a bit clunky. As I've already said, I don't mind the costume, but I hate the mask.
I hate the mask. This is what I was thinking the whole way through. I was like, oh, the costumes aren't actually that bad, but that bloody mask looks
like it was
awful.
done on paint, doesn't it?
It looks so bad.
Yeah.
I was just like, just take that off. And what it does to his eyes as well, I think his eyes go like a really bright blue.
Yeah.
And it just looks weird. Like it doesn't look, I don't know, it doesn't look like a disguise. It doesn't look heroic. It just looks odd. And I was like, I don't like this. And it is distracting. So is that what people mean when they say they don't like the costume, that it's the mask, or is it the actual physical, on his body?
I
the green
think it's
stuff?
that it's all CGI.
Okay, yeah.
And I think people prefer practical costumes, except where that's not possible in things like the Hulk or Thanos or whatever. I think that's what they mean. That's the general consensus I've gotten from the critical reception.
Why didn't they do that? Why not just put him in a green leotard or something like?
I don't know, because the guy who writes it or wrote the script or part of the script has written a lot of Green Lantern comics. Maybe it's just a stylistic choice, because maybe when he's surrounded by that much CGI, it might look a bit shit if he's in a leotard. But as I've said, my problem is not with the costume on his body, it's just the mask. That just needs changing. Maybe the mask needed to be more physical. I don't know, but it is an issue for me. So what else? Because I know you've got other issues with it. So hit me with them. What are they?
So some of the CGI was quite bad, and it was strange because some of it was quite good. So, the space, the aliens, all that was good. But so when he's flying in the jets at the beginning, all that CGI is terrible. And I just kept thinking about Top Gun and obviously using actual jets and the way they shot that. And I was like, why haven't you done that? But, maybe the budget wasn't as large and there were, more complications. But it was really bad. The jets, the CGI, all to do with that. Did not like that at all. The way that Hal comes across the alien and how he gets the ring, I found all that a little bit messy. I would have liked a little bit more story development and progress when it came to that. Like maybe he'd been watching Hal for a bit or something, or he'd been on Earth for a bit. It just all felt very sudden.
Why would it pick him? Because
exactly,
I guess the realization is supposed to be towards the end, isn't it? That it's not about being fearless. It's about having the ability to overcome your fears.
Sure,
but we don't really get that.
We don't know that till the end or whatever, do we? So when it's happening at the beginning, I was just like, why? Why is this happening? I wanted a bit more, either a bit more from that alien or maybe a bit more from Hal, just somewhere. Maybe put a few more strings of narrative in there to bring it all together nicely and securely. And then Taika Waititi just kind of finds him. Oh no, he phones him, doesn't he? To be fair, he does phone him and he comes over. So yeah, that's that one solved. When Hal crashes the jet on purpose, so they're trying out this new software or something, aren't they, in these jets to make them the most powerful jets there ever was.
Yeah, right? they're like AI jets. The whole jet thing it's like a pilotless system or something.
Right. So then Hal crashes his kind of intentionally, really. And he says the whole point was to kind of test it and, to make the next round of them better. I did you a favor and all this. And then, everyone's really angry at him and all this, But then when he sees Carol later on in the bar, she says like, oh, well, actually, we've managed to change the altitude on the jet. So you actually did us a favor and all this. And it's like, yeah, he said that. He said that when he did it.
Yeah,
he said he'd done you a favor. Now you're coming at him like you're saying that for the first time. And he seems to have no recollection of the fact that he said that as well. So it was just a bit of a hole and a bit of a disconnect from one moment in the film to the next. I absolutely hated the dead dad flashbacks. They were terrible. They were so cheesy and so corny that they were funny. It was laughable. That's not what you want when you're building your character's origin story. It needs to be gripping. It needs to be tragic. His dad died in horrific circumstances. He saw it happen. This plane crashed and then exploded and he saw his dad die. You could make that so, so powerful, and they just missed the mark completely.
We've seen so many dead mum and dad superhero storylines, or dead Uncle Ben, or dead
whatever. It's gonna happen. It's always a dead parent. Have you seen much South Park?
No, I have not actually.
Oh, okay. So there's an episode in that where basically their woodwork teacher he has an ex-wife who died tragically, and he's really pained by it, and he's got a photo of her on his desk and stuff, and he keeps having these flashbacks of her. She died in a plane crash too, of her being in this plane, and like she gets into the plane and she's like, "Watch me, Richard, watch me, I love you," and all this. And it reminded me of that. That's
Green
not what
Lantern
you want.
reminded you of South Park.
Exactly. And that's not what you want when you're trying to make a serious moment in your film. So there needed to be more care and consideration about that. That was avoidable.
Show don't tell again, though, isn't it? It's don't tell us his dad has died with dialogue. Just show us. That. Just show him as a kid watching the. We don't need the whole, here's my jacket and, oh, I'll be right back, son.
It was too much.
We just need flashback, hit little Ryan Reynolds, watch his dad, plane explodes, then back into reality. You know, that's all we need.
I am going to find out which episode of South Park this is, and I'm going to ask you to watch it because I can't tell you, honestly, how similar it is. So this is where my mind was. And this, I feel like this was really avoidable. Obviously, a lot of the things with the CGI, I do feel like it was a little bit ahead of its time. If it had waited 10 years to do this story, I think it would have been in a much, much stronger position CGI-wise. I do wonder if maybe the budget was very restricted and they just, they didn't have the money to do the kind of equivalent of Marvel or Star Wars CGI or whatever it may be.
I think from what I've read, it had a massive budget, but I think...
Where did it go?
I think I agree with you there. I think the problem was it's not a low budget. I think it had a massive budget. I think it's about what they did with it.
So we'll move on to talking about the critical reception of the film. So I haven't seen this and I didn't think it was going to be too great coming into it, but judging basically how you spoke about it at the beginning leads me to believe that perhaps it did even worse than I initially thought. So let's have a think. I think before you started speaking, no, it can't be a 6. See, I was thinking I'd give it a 6 maybe. It can't be a 6. I'll say I've never given anything a 4 before. Oh no, that's a lie. Actually, we've had a couple of bad
give
films,
this a
haven't
4?
we? Or maybe that. I think that's what it got.
4?
Probably.
Oh, that's what you think. What would you give it?
I'd give it a 5, maybe a 5.5.
Yeah.
It wasn't terrible.
No,
it really wasn't.
It's fine.
But I would say I'll go 4. That's a low one for me.
Okay.
And I'll sit bang on the 4.
So,
go on.
Just to remind everyone, I picked this because I think it is not as bad as the critics suggest.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what the internet that we use says. At the time of recording, IMDb gives it 5.5 out of 10.
Okay. Hey, average, right?
Rotten
That's
Tomatoes, however,
mm-hmm.
the audience give it 45%.
Okay.
And the critics give it 26%. I think that is far, far too low. It is not a perfect film. It is flawed. Mm-hmm. I would score it slightly higher than you. I'd probably give it 6, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It is not perfect, but it is by no means, for me, 26% bad.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you on that. I think there are enough redeemable things about it. I feel like our likes section then of this episode was quite long, and there was some substance to that. Yeah, I agree that 26 I think is incredibly harsh. But the IMDb score, I think I'd probably sit with the IMDb score.
Yeah,
I think.
I'd say not. Yeah, 5.56. That's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about the critics, which is usually the barometer, 26%. That's far too low.
Certainly, and I think overall it is definitely underrated, and it's. I feel like people have so many harsh things to say about it without commenting on the good things, because that's what we're here for.
And I almost think with films sometimes that the mythos around something being bad snowballs and things become worse than they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is, we've covered some famously bad films, and by which I mean we're not saying they're bad, but Speed 2, Grease 2, this, even other films we've done that aren't as well known are considered bad. And I think almost the legend and the myth of how bad they are becomes more than it actually is. So if you watch it and you look at it, it's like me. So like me and my friend, one of the things we always do when we hang out, because we don't get to do it very often, is quite often watch Batman and Robin, right? We'll have a few beers and we'll watch Batman and Robin, because we always say it's bad, right? But I've never not had a good time watching that film, because it's a right laugh, because it's so campy and it's so, it's such a visual spectacle. It's so daft. And I'm not saying it's like that, but what I'm saying is it's not as bad as I think its legend would suggest. And I think people need to make up their own minds about it and watch it. So that being said, are we putting Green Lantern in the underrated vault along with the others?
Josh, I will let this happen. And I think it is the right decision.
I'm so glad.
Bet you didn't see that coming, listeners.
Green Lantern is underrated.
Underrated.
However, we're going to do another film next week, and it's Alice's turn to pick. So, Alice, lot to live up to. What are we watching next week?
So, I thought it was about time I did another listener suggestion.
Oh, yes.
Josh, this is a very special one. So, the listener is a man called Roger, otherwise known as my dad. So, there's a film he's been trying to get me to watch for years. He's brought it up on many, many occasions, and I never have. So his way of getting me to watch it is that he wrote into the show and told me that we should watch. I'm not even joking. Told me that we should watch Blue Velvet.
Blue Velvet.
I'll give you all the justification as to why next week. But there you go. Blue Velvet. If you haven't watched it, listeners, get that watched.
Okay, next week we will be watching and talking about Blue Velvet. So go and give it a watch if you've not already seen it, and come back next week to hear what we think about it. In the meantime, please do get in touch like Roger has. If you've got a film,
hey, send us an email. We'll do it. We'll put it in the pile.
filmsandthatpod@gmail.com. We're on all the social medias. Just search for Just Films and That wherever your social medias are. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of them. Check us out. We try and put some content, film-related content out there as often as we can, and you can usually get in touch with us via them if you want to. Well, all that remains to be said then is next week we're going to be watching Blue Velvet. I'm excited, and I'm glad that Green Lantern, we've gone from green to blue.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
So, next week we're watching Blue Velvet. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for watching Green Lantern, Alice, and it's been a pleasure as always.
No problem at all, Josh. I'd do that just for you. Thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in, and please let us know what you think about Green Lantern.
Yes, please do. And it is goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.